Hey, what's up, guys? Hey, so I wanted to talk with you a little bit here about fielding in national pastime and sort of the way that it works. I was actually going to talk about the little E rules, which I think I had a little preview of 2 days ago, but I realized that I couldn't say very much about it without talking about how the fielding system itself works. So let's go ahead and get into this. If you haven't been watching these NP3 games, you really should at least give it a try because it kind of is a lot of fun. But let's go ahead and just jump right into this one and see if we can figure out some of this stuff. So the way the fielding works here is different. If you're used to Pursue the Pennant, Strat-O-Matic, that type of game, you're used to a completely different approach to fielding where you're rolling the dice again for individual fielders and seeing if the dice roll hits, one of the rules on a certain chart that indicates like an error or a possible error or whatever. That's not what's happening here. Not what's happening here at all. So to understand how this game works, remember it's all based on the boards. And here we're looking at the boards. This is, 1 through 11, which is where maybe the pitchers have an effect. Boards 12 through 45 is where fielding matters, right? So there are 3 different fielding columns. Fielding 3 means that the fielding is not very good. 1 is that the fielding is quite good. And 2, I guess, is in between, kind of average, right? And so what is potentially a single or an error with fielding 3 and fielding 1 turns into outs. So through this method, you can control what kind of impact the fielders have on hits and on errors and on outs and things like that. It's actually a pretty interesting system. This is the system that J. Richard Seitz came up with. If you remember, and if you're reading the blog, you know that the old national pastime game that J. Richard Seitz was obsessed with had absolutely no fielding system or pitching system at all. And so what this system does is it creates a fielding/pitching system for this type of game. And this is kind of the way that it comes out. So how do we figure out what happens? How do we figure out what column they're in? There are 3 different ways, and this is where I was starting to think about this and realize that it's really complicated. So we'll go back here to the fielding rules. Ignore the little E system. Ignore playing the infield in. We're just going to look at this part right here, right? So this is one of the ways that we can tell, or these are 3 of the ways I would say that we can tell. These are written kind of backwards. The first thing you want to look at is the sum of all the fielders' field ratings for these play result numbers, 12, 13, 14, 23, and 35 to 42, right? That would be the entire team's fielding range. Now, I'm going to give you a hint. 13 and 14 are never going to change. Those are always the same. Nothing will go different. 12 will be different. 23 will be different. And these ones might be different. They might not. Right? And so you're looking at if it's fielding 3 as if these numbers for all 9 fielders are less than 36. If they equal from 36 to 40, it's a solid fielding 2, and anything above 40, 41 or above is fielding 1. So what does that mean? Well, luckily this will tell us right away. Actually, it should. Let's see. Where can I see this? Yeah, here we go. Rate. So it's the fielding rating. It says rate here because there's not enough space. I'll stop complaining about it. The rate here, when it comes to outfielders, only looking at the one on the left. Don't worry about the number on the right, only the one on the left. This adds up for the Athletics to 35, which is fielding 3. So in those roles, they're going to have fielding 3 results, not fielding 1. The Senators have a better fielding team. They get a 39 fielding 2. That's the way that works. There's also a similar rating for infield, which is shown here. So fielding rating 39 will be for the team, 31 is for the infield. You kind of know this because you played the game. I know it's not really well explained. That's where that number comes from, and that's what it means. That would be the sum of the infielders' ratings, the catchers' ratings, and the pitchers' fielding ratings. So you take away the outfielders. Outfielders only have a rating from 1 to 3, which we'll see in this chart up here. So if you have a 41 and your outfielders are all fielding 3, that would be 9. You could have a rating of 32 for everybody else, which would put them in fielding 2 right down here. And so you can see it's sort of balanced out so that, if you have a big problem with one of these infield positions, you're not going to end up with fielding 1 down here for the team as a whole. In other words, and this should make people interested in WAR happy, in other words, different fielding ratings have different amounts of importance given to them. We're going to talk later about WAR and about why it's really frustrating for me to see, WAR adjustments that make like I don't know, Dante Bichette playing left field for the 1999 Rockies looked like the worst fielder in the history of baseball, right? As the problem is that he doesn't get as many chances as other fielders, right? This system sort of adjusts for that, and it does introduce this idea of team fielding. Team fielding is something that like doesn't exist, right? It's something that in the real world, when we talk about baseball, nobody pays any attention to because nobody knows anything about it. And yet somehow in 1951, J. Richard Seitz, who was younger than I am now, managed to figure out a system that accounted for team fielding. So, whatever you might think of Seitz and his personality and some of the, not so great parts about him, at least he knew how this team fielding worked. I think that he actually is a little bit ahead of sabermetrics in that sense because nobody else looks at this, right? So that is for play result numbers 22, 24, 25, 29, 33, and 34. For those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 numbers, we're looking at this infield fielding rating as opposed to the overall fielding rating. And then for the other air numbers and some of these fly ball numbers, we are looking at each individual fielder's rating. We will ignore the outfield numbers for now. We will look at that later because that's a different rule. 15, 16, 17, 18, 28, 19, 27, 20, 26, and 21, you consult this chart. And so an individual fielder will have an impact on what happens with that play depending upon where they are, if they're really good or if they're really bad. In theory, you could have Ozzie Smith on a really poor fielding team and have 18 and 28 end up with good results for Smith and then end up with sort of bad results for, the rest of the team everywhere else. In reality, if you have a guy who's a shortstop at 10, it's probably going to, you can do the math yourself. In theory, if the rest of the team is horrible, yeah, they will all be fielding 3, but it's going to be kind of hard. Anything that's even close to average will get you around fielding 2 at least. So that's really the way that this fielding system works. It's kind of complicated. There's other stuff to talk about too. We'll talk about the throwing ratings later. We'll talk about playing it in later. And eventually we'll talk about the fielding system, the little E system, which is the really interesting innovation. To give you an example of what it looks like, we'll go look here at the boards again. So we'll look at, we'll say there's a runner on third, right? If you have fielding 1, your shortstop with an 18 is still going to be an error. The runner will score. So that's not going to change much. Your 28 might change a little bit, right? Because he'll throw the runner out at home if you have the infield in. Actually, he'll do it either way. No, I'm sorry. With the infield in, he'll hold the runner, but he'll make the play at first, right? So there are like very, very very subtle differences between these things in different fielding situations, right? Usually an 18 is going to end up being an error, but sometimes not. With fielding 1 and runner on second, it'll be a fielder's choice, and the shortstop will make an excellent play over to third. But with like the bases empty, it's going to be an error unless you have 2 outs. The reason why, of course, is because shortstops make a lot of errors. They make more errors than other hitters or other fielders, right? So it's a little bit more common for you to have an error on the shortstop. And stuff like that that's kind of worked into this game that helps explain how this works. Now, that alone is not enough. The fielding system is actually quite complicated, and we'll talk about a little bit more about this next time, and then I think a couple of different videos as we really dig into this. This system looks easy and simple, and you think, oh, this is APBA, this is a real simple system. It's not that hard. We can figure it out. But when you look at this and you think about it, you'll realize that this system is actually more complex than the 5 rating system you see in Dynamite and in so many other games, because there's so many different things that go into it and so many different possibilities, which allows a good card maker the ability to really fine-tune things and to set things up to be realistic for individual systems. This is actually, for me, one of the reasons why I really prefer this type of game. I love playing this, and I like playing it better than, even OOTP and Dynamite and other games that are supposedly better. I think that this approach to fielding is superior. I think that it is much better because it's much more flexible, and it allows for a lot of subtlety in terms of the sort of results that you get. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with this replay. That's one of the reasons why we're doing the replay, to see what works better and what doesn't work so well. So there you have it. Hope you're having a good day. I'll talk with you again tomorrow. Bye.